Welcome back to my channel, and still we're talking about Heather's the Musical and what I actually thought about it. I really like Heather's the Musical because I felt like it was more descriptive about the characters, the relationships, and everything that happened between them, and it was more on like why the characters did what they did, gave them more depth, gave them more like clarity on like why the situations were happening, where did they originate from, and where the problems were coming from. Versus the movie itself, when you watch the movie, it doesn't really give you as much clue. It doesn't really give you as much direction. It's more like an in your face thing, and it's like, you would be lucky enough to get like a little hints, but like in the movie, it was like, it's like a slap in the face. It's like they'd be like, oh, Heather's doing this, but it's not like Heather's doing this because it's just Heather's doing this because she's this, or something like that. Like, for example, JD, they gave him more of like a backstory on like why he is the way he is and why he's doing this the way he is. And they kind of did this thing where like they made him more like a complex character, and they made him like one of the characters that you actually wanted to watch. And like they also did this thing where like in the movie they were like showing that him and her relationship was toxic, but in the musical it like gives you more depth on the relationship, and it gives you more like clarity in what the relationship was like, and like how far he would go for her, and the love that he had for her, and them just being together and all that stuff. And then like you find more about his mother, like the fact that his mother like literally, I don't know what to call it. Is this like a suicide thing? I don't know, but basically the mother went to like a house that was blowing up, that the father was blowing up for his work, and she blew up with him, and he's just been like a destructive little boy ever since. And then you got to find more about like the other Heathers. Like there was this Heather, the one that was like in the green, and then after that, hold on, let's see something. Yeah, that was like in the green side. And that Heather was basically like, what do you call it again? I am so sorry. Or that Heather was like taking over because like she was still wanting to be out of the spotlight. And the other Heather, was like, you found more about her, and you kind of found that after like the whole Heather situation of the Heather dying, it made her become like really sad and depressed, and she wanted to commit suicide. Which, and like, I feel like the movie didn't really do much about that. And then they have more like sympathy towards the two dudes, which is weird because like these two dudes were literally out here trying to literally assault one of the characters in the show. And then on top of that, the other Heathers were evil too because they literally set her up. Even though they try to make like the other one look like, oh, she feels sympathy, but it's like if she really feels sympathy, she would not set her up for her to be assaulted, but she did, which is awful. And then after that, they threw sympathy on them because they're like, oh, we're so sympathy because of their sexuality and because they're struggling. But it's like, how about they just turn around the behavior and they should be fine. And then after that, JD ends up like killing both of them because they attempted to like assault his girlfriend and stuff like that. And then they have this revelation that they're actually both gay and that their fathers are gay. And I was just gagged and flabbergasted at this because it's like, what the hell? Where did this storyline come out from? And then they have this whole thing. I was just shocked. I was just, oh my god. I was just mouth wide open in my head thinking about that. I'm like, what? What is that? For what reason? Yeah. And then we got more story about like Martha Stewart and what happened and all that. So basically Martha Stewart and the other dude were friends from like kindergarten, and something happened and she thinks like she fell in love with him, and then people forgot about that because it's kindergarten. Hello, nobody remembers that shit unless you do, but that's kind of weird. And then they brought it up and they made it seem like he was in love with her, like a whole prank date thing. And then after they did all of that, that stuff basically happened. He found out, he was mad, thought she was a weirdo. But that's one thing I hated, how she never, how they like never like made up for that. and everything. Like, they went out their way to ridicule this poor girl and just do awful things to her. And they never saw repercussions, but it was just like, that's just happened. Like, what? And then there was like the two Heathers. Honestly, I don't know which Heather is worse than the other one. I don't know if it was the first Heather or the second Heather. Like, Heather and then Heather 2.0. I don't know which Heather was worse than the other one. And on top of that, she kept on. Then when other Heather took over, no, when Veronica took over, that other Heather was like, oh, but at least I could keep these two people in line. But one thing I didn't notice about that was the symbolism of the show, because there was actually a symbolism in where of like, oh, so sorry. And where she goes from wearing green into red, because like that was the original Heather's color that she was wearing before she died. And then on top of that, Veronica also had sympathy for those two little boys. I would have never had sympathy because those two little boys literally tried to attempt to assault her. And then there's Heather, who is something else. Heather just makes my head hurt. She's just evil and she owns it. And even in her death, they still found a way to celebrate her. Like, how are you gonna be this evil and awful and still be celebrated in your death? And what else? I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, and then they also talked about like her bullying and how they just had no power and but it's like, I understand, I get that part, because it's like, to them they have no power, but then it's kind of like, that's the high school mindset. But then like when you're older and you look back at it, you kind of look like, oh, if I had said something to said teacher, they could have done something about it. So I get that part. And then after that, JD ends up deciding that he's gonna blow up the place because he's tired of them, and ends up blowing it up with himself in it and ends up killing himself. But I feel like the reason that he did that was because he started to like really, really love Veronica, and was trying to show a way of like, oh, if I blow up this place, I show that I love her and that I have empathy and all that stuff. So I feel like that's why he did that. And then that happens and everybody dances and all that stuff. But all in all, I would give that Heather the Musicals a 10 out of 10. I thought it was really good and really creative. Beautiful.